Hi, listeners. Thanks for joining in. I'm Z Johnson. The H.R. 4445 Ending Forced Arbitration of Sexual Assault and Sexual Harassment Act of 2021, or the Me Too bill for short, was recently signed into federal law and is being hailed as landmark legislation. This bill represents a drastic change in the way companies handle sexual harassment allegations, giving employees more options in how they'd like to proceed in the settlement of sexual harassment or sexual assault claims. Maggie Smith, Vice President of Human Resources for Traliant, a compliance training company, joins me today to detail the bill's importance and what this could mean for the future. I'm very excited to talk to you, Maggie, about this topic because, as you all know, this is very, very important, not just for the HR space, but for every industry. And this is definitely going to introduce a lot of changes to the workplace. What does the new Me Too bill really mean for workplaces globally, and will certain industries be affected more than others?
I think it's a great question. I don't foresee certain industries being affected more than others. I do think overall this is going to really open up options for employees. They're no longer going to be forced into really settling these kinds of things through mandatory arbitration. It empowers the employees to have a choice. They can either, move forward with a jury. They could certainly keep some privacy as well, but it really gives options to the employees, which I do think is a great shift. It's shifting kind of the power, if you will, away from employers and empowering employees.
What's the most beneficial part of this bill?
One of the biggest benefits of this is greater transparency. I think that if employers realize, which hopefully they do, that kind of this cloak of silence is being removed, mandatory arbitration is no longer mandatory, I'm hoping, that people will be put on notice and behave better. I mean, certainly that won't happen without intervention, without training, without creating a strong workplace culture, a culture where there's psychological safety. So I think that's huge.
Absolutely. And moving forward, how will this bill transform workplaces for the future?
I think this is such an exciting time for workplaces in general. I think that, as much as the pandemic certainly impacted all of us, I think that it's such a groundswell coming of people really pausing to say, what kind of employer do I want to work for? How do I want to spend my time? I'm really happy about it because I think before, where there was this mandatory arbitration, I feel that it really reinforced the stigma related to these types of infractions, where if someone was, sexually harassed in the workplace, even maybe something as significant as an assault, because there was this mandatory arbitration, I feel like it really kind of stigmatized the person, really thinking this is something secretive, or I did something wrong, or I'm afraid to come forward. So I'm hoping with that kind of cloak silence removed, it's an option that hopefully employers will behave better, but I think it's a transparency that employees want in the workplace. It's important to them.
And to go further on something that you actually just said in terms of someone being afraid to come forward, if there is someone in a workplace who feels that they've been subjected to any kind of harassment, especially sexual harassment, what would your advice be to them in terms of coming forward?
It's a great question because I know there's a hesitancy, and maybe people have this other experience in the past where maybe they feel they've come forward, voiced a concern to human resources even, and felt like, oh, it didn't go anywhere. No one did anything. I wasn't listened to. There was no action taken. I would say, please give it a chance. Bring the concern forward to a leader in your company that you trust. There has to be, I would hope, at least one individual on the leadership team that you're comfortable with. And I would say to HR people, make sure your leadership team is trained so that they know what to do with these, that they know that they have to report these concerns and bring them to HR and help pave the way. I would encourage employees to bring those concerns forward so that your employer has an opportunity to respond and to address the issue. And I would encourage HR professionals, make sure you're closing that feedback loop with people. They need to hear from you, or they're going to assume you did nothing about the situation. Do close that feedback loop and let the employee know that you heard them, you took their concerns seriously. I would say you definitely want to investigate it. That would be my advice. Just please, bring it forward to a trusted individual in the company.
Is there anything else that you think is important to know, or anything else that you want to add in terms of this topic of the Me Too bill?
I think in general, I would say, this is kind of a part of like a tidal wave of changes that are coming. It's not business as usual. Here we are over 2 years into the pandemic, and people are really taking a critical eye at companies they work for. And so this is an opportunity, maybe if companies haven't quite handled things as they should in the past, make sure that you train your employees on reporting these instances so that they can be addressed. You don't want to tolerate that in your organization. And certainly get some training for your managers on what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, what they're to do. Traliant, of course, has a lot of great trainings, but there are other options out there to really make sure that people understand. I think it's just a good time to really kind of reinvent the workplace so that it's a better environment for employees as well as employers.
There's no doubt that the new Me Too bill will change workplaces across every industry for the better. With the new law in place, plus guidance from leaders, employees can feel safe, heard, understood, and supported. Special thank you to Maggie Smith for joining me in this conversation. I'm Z Johnson.